And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to Comp and Coffee. I'm your host, Sean Lavana. I'm joined today by Bill Coleman.
Hello, Sean.
Good morning, Bill.
Good morning.
It's morning when we're recording this anyway.
Good morning.
Top of the morning.
Good afternoon and good evening to the folks out in podcast land.
If you're listening to this on your run faster. We also have a special guest today, Artur. Artur is one of the people interning here with us this summer, and he's joining us on the podcast today.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
Artur says run faster as well. Today, we want to talk about a topic that came up in one of our podcasts before, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, and I thought maybe it'd be good to come back and revisit it today. Bill's an expert in this area, so we're going to leverage his expertise in a big way. But we want to talk about incentives, both in terms of traditional structures and then more personalization of them, like customizing bonuses and rewards. So let's start off with that. One of the things that we were talking about last time that brought this up, that kind of tripped this in my mind, was we were talking about traditional structures. And we were saying that, building them in to align with company goals and then having the different levels of rigor for them so that it goes from top company line to managers, I guess probably to executives, to managers and departments, to each employee within the department. We were talking loosely about that, Bill, and you were like, you're already halfway to teaching a course on incentives, I think is what you said.
Yeah, that sounds like me.
So let's talk about that. I don't want to teach a course on it, but let's talk about, one of the things that I've always struggled with as a manager is making sure that I can pick a few simple goals for my team that align perfectly with the company goals. That part's the biggest challenge that I run into there is keeping it simple and keeping it a few things. But then the bigger challenge comes when you get into the different layers and mapping everybody to those main department goals, which hopefully map to the company goals.
That's it. And you've got sort of all the right words in there, too. The alignment is the key thing. And typically the way, good incentive plans are structured is you start with your company goals, the top level. What are we trying to do this year or in the next few years? And those goals, you see them all the time, particularly with public companies, certain growth rates, certain, new product rollouts or whatever. But the challenge in creating incentive plans is cascading those down through the organization, and how does each executive contribute, or in reality, how does each department contribute to those goals, and that a finance team has one kind of contribution to goals. Manufacturing would have another. Sales is always a pretty straightforward thing. But each department has its own contributions to that. And then as you start going down in the departments, each group within the department, each person within each group all have things that they can contribute. And, in a general sense, the higher up in the organization, the more closely your incentives would be tied to the corporate goals. And then as you go down, everyone should benefit from those corporate goals, but they have less control and they have less visibility. And so you start focusing more on the things that they control. So individual departments have more focus on their departmental goals than on the company goals. And that people at the top of the department heads, would be more focused on the department goals, and then the people that work for them are more focused on individual goals that roll up. So you have typically three tiers. You have the company goals, department or function goals, and then the third level is individual goals. And closer to the top of the organization you are, the closer to the top of that list, your goals are weighted much more toward company goals. And the further down in the organization you are, the more of an individual contributor, the more your goals are individually oriented. But when you look at them in total, the goals should all add up to what the company is trying to achieve.
Right. So in other words, if there's, a brand new employee, choose Artur as an example, if he came on full time here, and he joined, let's take a finance team or whatever, his goals might be very specific, like make sure our accounts collectible come in on the time that we expect them and that we're paying them in a similar amount of whatever that goal is, right?
Right.
Very much more micro goals, but that helps manage cash flow to the organization. And if cash flow is one of the main things, right? So if his manager is doing his or her job, Artur's goals should map to the department should be tied into the company goals.
Exactly, right. And it's, Artur's goal would be focused on something that he can control or that he can easily see, from his desk. And I mean that figuratively. He can see, and that's something he can do and something he can measure, and he can assess whether or not he's doing well or not doing well towards that goal.
Yeah, right. So in other words, it shouldn't be anything that's outside of your control or something that's
right.
Something you can't have an effect on. Like, hey, Artur in finance, make sure that sales gets the contract signed on time.
Right. Exactly. And what happens when you give employees goals that they can't really control or can't affect, they will tend to ignore them. It's like if I'm Artur and I don't know how to make sales change the way sales does things, I just sort of write that off. I ignore it and I go on and do something else. And that's, it's not good for me. It's not good for the company.
So this seems pretty solid in a silo, right? If each department's its own silo and mapping up. One of the things I see happen a lot, and I'm curious in your take on this, is, let's use the marketing and sales dichotomy, right? So marketing maps typically to lead generation, for example, and they need to hit their goal for sales to be able to sell effectively, to hit the company revenue goals, right? So if those goals are not aligned, if all these are made in silos, then all of a sudden you have departments that are interconnected. Accounting and finance could be another one. Sales and account management, right? Operations and manufacturing.
Well, in most modern companies, many departments are interconnected. That's the
touche, Bill.
Sorry, that's the way it works.
In most modern companies, people work together. Touche. My point, though, is like if you're developing these things in silos, because it's easy within a department to say like, I need to drive revenue and cash flow and profitability, whatever the company's goals might be. You look at that in your department, but that might not be the best thing for the other interconnected departments. They may have other things that they need me to do that they think I should prioritize.
That's true, and the goals should be like worked out from the top down, and they shouldn't be. The goals should not be developed in a silo. So, to your example of a minute ago, marketing shouldn't be delivering something that marketing thinks is good for sales and not have sales buy-in that will work, and and vice versa. And I think that a lot of times, in my experience, I've seen that the planning process falls down because, well, everybody out there listening is going to get this. It's at the last minute, at year end, you're doing all kinds of things, and somebody's like, oh, we need our KPIs for next year. And, and you've got to put it all in place, and there's a fire drill, and, I want all my managers or, all my VPs to give me their KPIs, and it's not done as thoughtfully as, we as comp professionals would want to do it. And so you start having these conflicts, and then it creates friction between departments, and, marketing sends leads to sales, and then sales says those leads aren't good, or, similar things in other departments where you have not the right alignment in place. It seemed right from each individual's perspective, but you didn't build it collaboratively.
Right. Sales projects a certain amount of sales, manufacturing ramps up to build that, and then they don't sell them, for example, or vice versa.
Right. Yeah.
They underproject, manufacturing doesn't make enough, and then all of a sudden there's more coming in.
And one of the big challenges you're hitting on, it's a slight variation. One of the big challenges you run into often with sales, but you can see this in other departments, is sales will build a number based on projected product release or, other parts of the company delivering something. And if that doesn't happen, sales can't get its goal. And so having my team's goal be completely dependent on somebody else delivering something is a challenge, and that it should be product's goal. In my example, product needs to have the same goal or, the same incentive to deliver something, so that if they're falling down on their goal, they should know that, and they should actually be incentivized to deliver the new product for sales.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to one of the things I think you're seeing, to the point you made about almost all departments being interconnected now. I see a lot of people mapping to revenue, right? Marketing maps to revenue now. Obviously, sales does. Products certainly should, that we need to sell this much of this new product in order for it to be considered a success, right? That each company and each department has clear goals within those that tie to, quote unquote, the bottom line. Again, whatever that means. It could be revenue, could be profit, could be cash flow, whatever the big goals are for the company that year.
Right. And it's helpful for people to understand that. And so that, you just said, product has revenue goals and to help sales sell. Product needs to understand that part of product's job is to help sales sell, help sales prepare to sell, train to sell, so that it's not, we built it, now it's your problem to figure out how to sell it. Everybody should be in the same boat, trying to get this product out the door and trying to get revenue for it.
Yeah, sure. So in other words, that's one of the reasons you see those main goals coming about, right? Like everybody contributes to the growth of the company, for example.
Yes. And the most effective managers are the ones that understand that they're managing part of a bigger whole and that they need to fill in and participate and make their colleagues succeed. It's not a competition, it's a collaboration. Everybody is going in the same direction.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that's what great teams tend to be made of, right? It's not each individual turf war and battling for your department. It's you are part of a whole.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of focus over the last, 20 years on teamwork. But I don't think people think of it that way and don't realize that it's not like smiling and high-fiving in the hallway. It's making sure that your peers, your collaborators, your colleagues are succeeding at their goals, because that will help you succeed at yours.
Stock images have led me wrong. I thought everybody just smiled and high-fived in the hallways, and there was a perfect group of 5 different ethnicities.
Yeah, we're sitting in a cruise shell, rowing down a river at dawn.
Teamwork.
Or, quote you, Sean, rowing faster.
Row faster. All right, so let me ask the obvious question here, and maybe a lot of comp people do know the answer to this, but I'm curious about this. So we're talking about, in order to achieve your incentives, typically in the way that you would align these in a traditional way, that you would have to hit these goals. But let's take some of the outliers here. Let's talk about, Toys R Us was a recent example, right? Or some of the Wall Street banks that collapsed in 2008. A lot of the payouts were still made there. So why does that happen if they're not hitting goals?
Not actually fully aware of either. Well, I can talk about both in a general sense. Not fully aware of either of those situations in a precise way, but it's a failure. It's a failure of the incentives. It's a failure of the design and probably of the goals. The one, I guess, counter argument to that would be, as a company is going down, let's talk about Toys R Us.
Sure.
It's possible that what happens is the board or CEO, senior management, need people aligned with maximizing the value on the way out, whether that's bankruptcy in the Toys R Us case, or if you're going to sell the company, you want your team, and the senior members of which are very likely to be gone as soon as a transaction happens, regardless of what it is. You want them to be engaged and working hard, even though they know that they're working their way out of a job. So you put a different set of incentives in place as you see that coming. Examples where companies miss the market, where companies are failing, where companies, don't understand what the competitive changes are and continue operating. Often, I'm guessing, and this is just a guess, is that they continue operating on an old paradigm of what do we need to do? What do we need to do to compete? What are our measures? How much are we selling? How is the store growing? Et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes even react to changes, their own changes, as their numbers start going down. They recalibrate the goals rather than saying we should still be growing at 10% a year, 20% a year. They say, well, the last couple of years we've been flat. So as long as we stay flat, everybody gets their target bonus. Which it makes sense on one level, but somebody should be questioning that, going, well, is our goal to not grow?
Just exist.
Yeah, to just exist. And there are people out there that say, you either get bigger or you get smaller.
It's like a tree. You're either growing or
you're dying.
Terrible business phrases. I think you're right with the Toys R Us one. I think what happened there was it was an incentivization to keep the management team on through the bankruptcy. The banks is a whole other story, right? I think there's a lot of incentivized to take risks and
right, yeah, and there's a weird phenomenon on Wall Street of how sort of almost all behavior is incentivizable until it goes on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, in which case it was we didn't know that was going on. It was a rogue trader, and at that level, there's a reaction and a change. But I don't understand how those bonuses keep going up and up and up. Occasionally you do see bad years on Wall Street, bonus wise.
Sure. Artur, let me ask you something. You're, in between your junior and senior year in college now?
Yeah, just actually I graduated in May.
Okay.
But I still have a semester left over in this upcoming fall just because I was a transfer student.
Okay. Studying business?
Yes, business, marketing, advertising.
Have you, do you in any of your classes, have you studied the 2008 collapse?
Yeah, many. Actually.
How do they teach you about it?
I think how they brought us to think about it was really how can we make this happen less often, and what can we do differently to encourage employees and government officials to act more differently and positive to these kind of situations, to not make them happen anymore or less often.
Right. Learn lessons and don't repeat mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you say that because one of the things I always rant about is that one of the main lessons I was taught in business repeatedly, and it didn't matter which class it was in. Like I even remember this happening in an HR class of all places, that the primary value of a business exists to increase the wealth of its shareholders. So shareholders directly, not stakeholders, not like the general community, or to your point you were making, like how does government act better to prevent these things from happening and work with companies. It was literally to increase wealth. And so that's, I think, what led a lot of this stuff to happen.
The financial sector and sort of the Wall Street banks in general are the epitome of that. They are...
Greed is good.
Greed is good. Gordon Gekko. They're all focused on maximizing value, maximizing profit, and they push hard, and sometimes they push too far or go too far.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's shift over to, we talked about kind of the traditional structure of incentives there. I think there's probably two other areas to cover. The one that I want to jump into maybe after this would be the personalization of them. One of the things that we were talking about in a previous podcast is that you're seeing bonuses, profit sharing, year-end incentivization coming more into play now. Yeah,
I think it's fairly common alongside incentives, and sort of this podcast we're on right now started as a result of talking about the difference between incentives and bonuses, which is somewhat a semantic thing that comp people like to hold over everyone else's head. Whereas an incentive is you put down a set of rules, goals, or KPIs in place and tell people if you deliver X result, we're going to give you Y dollars. And so you understand the equation as an employee. And bonuses tend to be more like a profit sharing, a after the fact reward for work well done. And so you see typically with smaller companies that have, less HR or compensation staff, will tend to have bonus plans. CEOs like them because they like the flexibility. They don't like being tied down to a formula, a promise. I'm sure you've all heard the well, what if we don't have the money? I don't want to commit to anything. That sort of argument. And there's something to be said for that. And particularly when you have a business that's owned or primarily owned by one or two people, or a small business where you're always checking the bank account to make sure you have enough money to make payroll, you don't want to commit to things you don't have to commit to. But you do want to reward your employees. So what you do is at the end of the year, you say, we had a great year. Here's a bonus. And it could be the same bonus for everyone as a percent, same bonus as a dollar amount, or could be varied based on discretionary measures, discretionary views of either the CEO or the CEO with the individual managers, or even the managers could get a budget. Here's $50,000 for your team. You figure out how to allocate it.
It's always fun.
Yeah.
I've actually never heard them delineated that way before. I should have known that there's a slightly different definition to each, but I've always heard them used interchangeably.
Right. And it's easy to use them interchangeably. And, I don't know that if you poll 100 compensation people that 100 would say there's a difference. I think it helps to communicate the style, to have a different word for the different types of things. And if you think about it, a bonus is a bonus. It's not a.
It's a nice to have.
It's right. And it's not an incentive. It's not creating a behavior. It's rewarding a behavior.
All right, let's talk about. There's a ton of money flowing into rewards and recognition right now, and the benefits and what can we offer people, and then B, how do you make the rewards personal because we deem them to be psychologically more meaningful. And so we talked about this before on one of our podcasts where there was a very large American corporation that decided to enter their employees who would achieve certain levels of whatever the goals were set into a raffle. And that raffle could win them a couple things, but the biggest thing was a Mercedes.
Right.
Not very personal, right? But, as we've found out at some of the shows that we've been to lately, people like tickets. They like raffles.
True.
But they don't like losing control over, hey, I believe I've earned this. Right? And so I'm lumping a couple of things together here, so let me back out. Let's talk about personal. So that was an example of something that's not personal that companies are trying to do in a modern way. Give me some personal examples.
Well, I think the personal examples, I think it's good, and I think that we're seeing more of this, and it's smart. And if you think about it, is the internet, you're not going to see where I'm going with this. The internet has made personalization of all kinds of things possible. If you want to get a coffee mug with your name on it, you go to Zazzle and you pick out your mug and you put your name on it, and you can have
Zazzle.
A run of one.
Good for you.
And you can personalize pretty much anything very easily. And why is that? Because you can, and two, because people like personalization. And if you think about the employer-employee relationship, I think one of the things that a lot of companies and a lot of managers forget is that relationships are usually between people within the company, not between the company and an employee. And side note, same goes for your customers and your clients. The clients are loyal to the people they deal with at a company. My point being, you can strengthen that relationship and strengthen the connection by personalizing things. So a manager who knows an employee's likes and interests can provide a recognition reward, a spot bonus, an incentive in a form that appeals to an individual employee. If you have an employee who's an outdoorsy person and they do a great job, you could give somebody a $100 or $250, $500 bonus, or you could give them a gift certificate to an outdoor REI or an outdoor supply store, or you could actually go and buy them a tent if they want a tent. Like, if you communicate with your employees and you know them, the things they're thinking about, the things that they want, and giving them rewards that acknowledge that you know who the person is much more meaningful, and you can get more bang for your buck by doing that. And it requires a little bit more thinking on your part and a little more giving up control from the HR compensation function, and allowing your managers to go off and do these things, which are all...
I can hear every HR manager cringing right now a little bit like, hey, what happens if this goes too far?
Right.
And all of a sudden...
Sorry. And you have to know, you have to know your managers and, know your people and know that you're not going to start seeing all of these crazy expenses. And then, and it's very hard. It's hard to manage this because you get this pushback, or I guess little grabbing going on, and getting the programs get bigger and bigger and people start doing more and more, but
don't they anyway?
And then you start putting in rules, and then you have these policies, and you get this 20-page document of how to do this. And, it's got to be simple. It's got to be clean, and your organization has to be mature enough to handle it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we talked earlier in one of the previous episodes with Patty McCord, the former chief talent officer at Netflix, on this. And, she's I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she's a big proponent of not having those rules. Can't we just trust people to be able to do their jobs and do them well? Don't we hire good people? And if we hire good people, do we need all these policies and restrictions and telling them what not to do? Or is it easier just to say, hey, just do right by the company?
Yes. I think that's right theoretically. I think a lot of companies would have a hard time letting go of the reins. And I think that the reality is you could probably do the Patty McCord approach and just watch. And you know who the
potential hazard areas will be.
Right. I was going to say bad actors. I don't want to go so far, but where the trouble spots are likely to be, and you watch those few people and keep them in check, and let those that are following the rules or the general spirit of the program, let them keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah, to your point, it's probably a better bang for your buck. So maybe those annual budgets or whatever, however you set the money aside for it, don't increase as quickly as they might otherwise. And it really does help. I love the idea of it. It really does help build that personal rapport between the manager and the employees, right? As a good manager, you should know them as a holistic person, right?
Right.
And know what they enjoy doing when they're not at work.
Right. Know the person outside the office.
Right. They should be that same person when they come into work, by the way, too. But that's a whole other discussion. And if you know that about them, then you should be able to provide thoughtful gifts, more thoughtful incentivizations. To your point, it doesn't have to be, I don't know what specific backpack you want if you're a hiker, right. But I know you like REI, right?
Exactly.
So here's a thoughtful thing to that. Go get something you wouldn't have otherwise.
Right. And that just communicates a little bit more, and it adds value to the relationship between the manager and the employee, between the employee and the company, and it builds the culture. You now have somebody who goes out. Nobody goes home and tells their husband, their wife, their friends, it's like, oh, I got a $200 spot bonus today because I did a great job on such and such a project. But hey, I just got a tent from my boss so that we can, for our hiking trip.
From my boss, we're going hiking this weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not at all weird.
All right, let me try a different example.
Tents are bad examples. This is where HR jumps in. All right, Arthur, let me ask you a question about this. So say you're going to look at a company next year, and I don't know if you have any. Don't answer the question. Say you have student debt, and the company says to you, and I don't think the offer would be this clear, and I'm going to come back to you with the question then too, Bill. Say the company says to you, you can have $1,000 cash bonus every year as part of your offer, right? Your compensation for working here. Mm-hmm. Or we can do, and it wouldn't ever be worded this way, but so I'm paraphrasing. Or we can do $1,000 worth of personalized gifts that we think you'll like. What would you value more, the cash or the thoughtfulness?
If I'm looking from a student's perspective of if they have loans and outstanding loans, that personally starting off, let's say, young and with some loans to deal with, I'd actually value the cash to pay back loans and start life with a fresh start. The personalization is quite nice and makes you feel more welcome, yes. but I think there's a breakdown that goes for maybe younger professionals. The cash would kind of ignite a fire for them, like, oh yeah, I'm getting cash, I can do whatever I'd like. But I think, when you've worked at a company, you've been valued for quite some time, the personalization is a really great touch. I think that people really start to appreciate and know the value of things when you mature and get older. So
let me ask you this, Bill. Is this an either or proposition, or is this a and?
I think it's an and it's a tricky one. I think that the personalization side is more the icing on the cake,
right.
And it's the second or third layer, fourth layer of compensation. It's not base pay. It's not incentives. It's not bonuses. It's recognition. It's spot bonuses. It's
how a company might differentiate itself.
It's sporadic, right? And it's more tied toward culture and retention and sort of team building.
Yeah, I thought Artur made a good point with that, where he said, if I've been working here for a few years, but what that implies is you have some bonus incentivization structure in place. You want that, and now I want something else too, right? And these might just be a nice way to the point that we were talking about, get more bang for your buck and build a better relationship.
Right.
All right, so I think we covered a lot of ground today. Is there anywhere else you'd like to go a little deeper in?
I got nothing off the top of my head. I mean, we can keep going and going.
Depends how far people are driving for the vacations this summer and how long they want to listen to us.
Yes. Although I will add, I do this to you all the time, Sean. And one more thing.
Here comes our next podcast. Get ready, everybody.
Or the last one. Not all of these recognition things have to be like cash denominated either. Things, and you hear this a lot with, talk about millennials, which, there's your next podcast, how to deal with millennials.
How to deal with people that think millennials are one group that all behave the same.
Yes, exactly. Finally, a generation that's perfectly homogeneous. Not true. But in that talk with millennials in quotes, giving people the opportunity to take unusually large amounts of time off, for example.
Go travel for 4 weeks in Europe, for example.
Right, and not be penalized for that.
Right.
You can get a lot of value out of that with an employee. You're not paying for the trip, and in fact, you don't necessarily even have to pay the employee's salary while they're on the trip. Just giving them the flexibility to do it for certain people is a huge value.
Yeah, sabbaticals are huge now, right? I mean, if you're with a company for a certain period of time, I think at least in tech companies, you're seeing that pop up more and more where, I think smart companies want you to go learn about different aspects of the world.
And recharge.
And recharge for sure. Absolutely. That's the other big component of it. I think, when you look at how you learn, that's one of the ways is experience. And you're only going to be able to bring new ideas and new ways of doing stuff to the company by having those types of experiences. So it's smart in the company to do it. It's something... to your point, maybe it's not just a younger generation. I'm always a little shy about saying just a younger generation, but I think it's something everybody would value. Right? It just depends on your stage of life, how much you value it. But I think, I commonly do that after we have very stressful times in my department, right? Where there's big things going on, and I'll say to somebody, I don't want to see you for the rest of the week, or I don't want to see you next week, and just go away, go recharge, have time off, relax.
Right.
Don't think about work. Don't check your email.
Right.
And then come back and be ready to go again.
And it's that exact thing is like understanding the people, understanding what they have gone through, and, giving them the unexpected surprise reward of the rest of the week off. It sounds trivial, but it's not.
All right. Well, thank you for that. We'll have more podcasts coming up. Thank you for listening today, everybody. Artur, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
As always, give us some reviews. Give us 5 stars. Give us little comments. If there's topics you want to hear about, feel free to reach out to me or Bill on LinkedIn, or email us, or tweet at us. Can I tweet at you, Bill?
You can, but I'm not sure it actually gets to me.
Send a carrier pigeon to Bill.
Thank you.
And yeah, we're always open to thoughts, feedback, and ideas. So please subscribe, review us, and let us know your thoughts. Also, shameless plug for CompCon, where we are now north of 400 people coming to this. That's www.compcon.com. It's going to be the biggest gathering of compensation people that enjoy what we talk about on this podcast, which is challenging the ways that you think about how we do what we do, where the industry is heading, and really interesting thought leaders that are going to get us there, Patty McCord being one of those. So go there, come to Boston in September and join us for CompCon. Subscribe. That's all I got. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.